Hi, yes, thank you for having me. Uh, this summer, my wife and I and her parents, we took a cruise from Vancouver up to Alaska, and on the way on the cruise, stopped at Skagway, rode the White Pass, and then rode the Alaska Railroad, the whole length of it from Seward to Fairbanks. So I'm excited to share that with you. So yeah, so we started gonna start with an intro where it's basically just a hodgepodge of things I saw on the trip and also some of my favorite photos that weren't train related. I took probably about 10 to 12,000 photos and yeah, it was about a 2 week trip. This first photo is taken from the cruise ship and it shows the GE engines built in the 50s and 60s on the White Pass. And here we are in Vancouver. This is just a one commuter line called the West Coast Line. Runs about 40 miles out of downtown Vancouver. That's our cruise ship in the background, the Norwegian Jade. This photo is taken from the cruise ship. This is a station built by the Canadian Pacific called the Waterfront Station. And what was interesting, the beginning of the cruise and the very end of the cruise, I could see trains from my balcony. So I thought that was kind of neat. This is the route of our cruise took. One of the stops on there, it says, was Skagway. That's where we rode the White Pass Railroad. This was taken at the end of the cruise in Whittier. That's the Alaska Railroad in the background. So in this hodgepodge of things in this first part, showing interesting sight when we our first stop on the cruise was in Ketchikan, and immediately in the visitor center were some rail cars. And as explained here, these cars are actually this was a half-mile long railroad for a pulp mill, and the freight was barged in and out of Prince Rupert about 100 miles away uh, with Canadian National Railroad. It's inside one of the box cars. This is at Skagway on the 4th of July. It was a nice surprise to see the steam engine come out. It was out on display for the 4th of July parade. There's me. My wife took that. I didn't take that. It's my wife, Pamela, and I. We're on the Hurricane Turn, which is a flag stop train on the Alaska Railroad inside the Vista Dome built in the 50s. This was after riding on the whole length of the railroad up to Fairbanks, and I was fixated on how this was maybe the most northern railroad in the Western Hemisphere. It's like 15 miles north of the Alaska Railroad. It's just a little tourist railroad at a gold mine. There's some prospectors. And this was narrow gauge. This is a car ridden by President Harding, Warren G. Harding. He actually drove the Golden Spike for the Alaska Railroad and visited in 1923. And then actually later on that trip, he died in California. So, but it was a historic trip, and the photo on the right is inside the car, I think in the lavatory. That last photo and this photo were taken in a place called Pioneer Park, sort of like a Old West themed theme park in Fairbanks. This is a narrow gauge railroad in the park. And also there was a railroad museum called the Tanana Valley Railroad Museum, had some nice display. It's in Fairbanks. And these railroad cars I saw were near the 65th latitude and about as far north as I went on the trip. And I think they might be the most northern cars in the country. Who knows? But it's about 20 miles north of Fairbanks. Definitely, I think they might be from the 50s. And then a famous attraction in Fairbanks is riding this riverboat that takes you to different areas of interest around Fairbanks. And at one point, we passed by this Pullman car. I thought was neat. Next couple photos are just some of my favorites. While on the trip, did a whale watching boat ride. This is a hard photo to get. It's you don't know where the whale's going to jump out, but the boat captain was you know, he said, "Oh, I think he's about to jump out of the water and get ready." So we were prepared. Some of my friends think this photo is a Photoshop, but it really happened. It's a stare down between eagle and bear. It's a very Alaskan photo, I think. And this is the bear's cub, actually. We were leaving the area, and then a few minutes later, this cub was hiding behind the rock there and appeared. Some glacial melt. We went on this trip in the last week of June and in early July, so the weather was warmer and it was really good weather the whole time. Almost everywhere we went, people were saying, "Oh, this is such a great day, great weather. You guys really lucked out." There's Denali. It's also kind of a rare occurrence to see the whole mountain like that. This was taken about 60 miles away from the mountain, and it's actually the most prominent mountain in the world because you're seeing the whole mountain, and it's over a little over 20,000 feet. If you were near Mount Everest, you're only seeing about half of that altitude of Everest, so this is actually more prominent than Everest. And there's the famous Alaskan pipeline. So it was part of that riverboat tour in Fairbanks. We saw like a recreation of a native village. All right, so part two was on July 4th. We rode the White Pass and Yukon route. At first, we took a bus up to Carcross in the Yukon, and then rode as far as you can ride on the train, 67 miles back to Skagway. and was pulled by these GE 90 series engines. But I think there may be like just three left running, so it's two out of the three that are still running. They had 10 at one time. And a little bit of history. It was built in 1898 during the gold rush, Klondike Gold Rush, and it was originally built all the way to Whitehorse, where from there people could go down the Yukon River and head to other towns that hit gold, like such as Dawson. And but pretty soon, the gold kind of the rush ended pretty shortly after the railroad was built, and but it found greater use during World War II to help bring supplies for building the Alaska Highway. And as mentioned here on August 4th, 1943, there were dozens of train movements. Currently, there's only 67 miles running of the railroad from Carcross to Skagway, and the active rolling stock includes uh, four Alcos, six NRE 3000 class engines. They're pretty new. They're from came to the railroad in 2020, and then three out of 10 active GE 90 class shovel nose units. And they also, I was impressed that they had so many. We went by the yard. They have about 80 coaches. This is one of the newer engines. This was taken right by the cruise ship. So some of the trains leave right from where the cruises dock. This was kind of a sad sight. I was told these engines, which have been retired since 2021, they're there to block rock slides from hitting the cruise ships. So they're it's spendable, but they look so nice, freshly painted even, I hope that's not true, but I was told by a couple people that's why they're sitting there. I was inside the gift shop when the engine went by and I ran out to get this picture. I was totally surprised that it came out. Number 73 is a 282 Baldwin built in 1947. They also have another steam locomotive, number 69, but it hasn't run since 2013. In this photo, there's two trains. I wonder if you could see both. It's pretty far away, but that was exciting. The one on the left was the first one I saw, and then all of a sudden the headlight for the one on the bottom right. They must have passed each other a couple minutes prior. And the one on the left is actually the same train that I saw earlier that I got by the cruise ships. There it is, climbing up to the White Pass. And there's the other train heading down. So those last few photos were taken while taking a bus up to Carcross, and now we've reached Carcross. Had to go through British Columbia a little bit, and then made it into the Yukon. Carcross was an interesting place. It kind of had a Wild West feel to it, and there was lakes and even like a little bit of sandy beaches, and the weather was really nice. Here's our train coming into Carcross. I don't I'm not entirely sure if people rode round trip or not, but if there's the option for that, but there were people riding from Skagway to get to there. These are some of my favorite photos, and it was a surprise to me. I didn't know these GE engines would be pulling our train, so it was exciting to see them. There it is. The train's pulled into town. Now in the town right here, there's actually a Y that historically the trains would navigate to turn around. The photo on the left is about the spot where the train would have reversed and gone to the right to do complete the Y. But recently they built a loop track about a mile further down. So it's technically when it's turning around, it gets a little bit closer to Whitehorse, about a mile closer. I think I read there's about 69 miles of active track out of the original 110. And on the right, the train's pulling into the station. But in between these two photos, actually, a rail train passed through, and that's this photo. And that was also a surprise. I was in the station and I hear a train. I think it's ours, but it was this train that was pulled by these two Alcos. And there's only a few months out of the year where they can really do some heavy maintenance where it's warm enough. And so I imagine the it's actually might be pretty common to see this train in the summertime. Now we're riding the train to Skagway, and a couple miles from Carcross, we pass the rail train. This is a beautiful lake called Bennett Lake, and we run along it for 30 miles. And I'd say dozens of times, I saw this vantage point where going around a curve, and we were seated towards the back of the train, so got nice photos of curves. There's an abandoned shack there. There's some old freight cars when passing this siding. I wonder if they were painted only a couple decades ago, like repainted, because it actually, I feel like it looks pretty good considering the elements it's exposed to. Here's a station we passed, not in use, but at this point we've crossed into British Columbia. We're only about 15 miles from Carcross. What I thought was neat about this journey and Alaska too, the Alaska Railroad too, is that little has changed since the railroad was built. This is probably exactly how it looked 100 years ago. So The lake is a certain turquoise color, most likely from a lot of glacial melt in the area. Get that color. Now at milepost 40, so 40 miles from Skagway, we're at Bennett where we stopped for a half hour. Um, a lot of people got off to go hiking and took their things out of the baggage car, and it was a good opportunity to get out and get some photos of the train. Some scenes from the station. The bottom left, that's engineer John Westfall. He's worked on the railroad for 50 years, the most senior employee. And he seemed to always want to be busy doing something when it's his time to take a break. He's doing this long round trip and he's trying to fix the display piece. Just make sure it's all right, in good condition. Now we're on our way again, and very beautiful terrain and scenery. It's a point called Vista, milepost 36. Pretty soon after this, we enter an area where it's pretty rocky and there's lakes and there's not much vegetation. And used to be a glacier in that area and it's all gone and it's the remnants of it. Wonder how long those ties have been there. This is that area that there used to be a glacier. Some various maintenance of way equipment. Here we are at Fraser, milepost 27.7. Most trains they turn around at the summit at White Pass, or they turn around here at Fraser. And then the train I'm on, it's the only train during the day that goes to Carcross. And to the right of the train's actually like where the border crossing is for cars. But it's not the actual border. That's a little further down. I have pictures of that. And I'm pretty sure all the other train rides don't have these GE engines pulling them. I mean, perhaps, but I think now the fact there's only three active ones is probably a pretty rare um, treat to ride behind them. And on the whole trip, you're allowed access outside, so it's great. I tried to pick one of these two to show, but I couldn't. I love them both, so here's both photos of telegraph poles. Got a couple of moose. Probably on the whole trip, I saw moose maybe three or four times. I was in Alaska in in the actual state for about 7 or 8 days. We're getting closer to the summit now. Old water tower. This is just a couple of years old. It's a new turnaround loop at White Pass. It's recently cut rock. This is milepost 20, 20 miles from Skagway. And right there, where the flags are, that's the border cross. That's the actual border. And pretty much after crossing the border, you start entering the Skagway River Valley or Canyon, and the grade is steeper. We head down from about 2,000 feet within 20 miles. This bridge was built in the 70s, replacing this bridge because of in the 70s they had heavier freight equipment, freight cars. I read that this bridge was, when it was built in 1900, it was the highest railroad bridge in the world. I think I stood outside probably 80% of the time. It was so great. Every time I go back in, I'm like, oh, I gotta go out again. This looks great. And here we are at Inspiration Point at mile 16.8. This is probably the most photographed area spot. And I actually didn't, there was a lot of trees kind of blocking the way, and there were other people on the balcony. I didn't get a picture of the engine at the curve, but it is very beautiful. My wife Pamela, though, however, did get a phone picture. So way to go, Pam. There's our cruise ships from about, say, around like 1,500 feet, about 15 miles still from Skagway. And the top images, that's the trestle right at Inspiration Point. The rivers and streams on the whole trip were really flowing. This time of year with the warmer temperatures, you have all the snow and the glaciers melting. I'm sure in the wintertime there are little streams that are frozen solid. Now we're just almost at the end of the trip. We're passing the shops and the yards for the White Pass. Those black engines are the same new 3000 class engines. And then in the back there's engine 69. There's an Alco and engine 73 back at the shop. I was surprised by again by how many coaches there were. We passed most of them, not all of them, and there are three or four tracks of coaches. Now we're pulling into the station. This is just about a quarter mile, 5-10 minute walk from the cruises. It's the actual station at Skagway. But like I said before, trains do also begin right next to the cruise ships. And the right next to the engine is engineer John Westfall. He's been with the railroad since 1974 and another job well done did a 134-mile round trip, narrow gauge railroad. There's a 260 there, built in 1881. I believe it was their first engine that they had when they began running in 1901. And behind that is a rotary built in 1899. All right, so our third and final part is the Alaska Railroad. Just a couple days after riding on the White Pass, we made port in Whittier, and we actually didn't board the train at Whittier. We took a car ride to Seward and spent a few days there. And Seward is the most southern point on the railroad. And at Seward, we got on a train from there to Anchorage, which was about 4 hours. Spent the night in Anchorage, and then took another 3 or 4 hour train ride up to Talkeetna the next day and spent a couple days there. And I got some photos of trains passing through town. And then we took about an 8 or 9 hour train ride from there up to Fairbanks. So this railroad was built in stages from 1904 to 1923. The first stage was built out of Seward in 1904, and about 70 miles was built. But then for about 10 years, there was a pause. And in 1915, construction resumed, and the town of Anchorage was built for the railroad, sort of like a base camp of operations. And by 1923, President Harding drove the Golden Spike closer to Fairbanks in Nanina, Alaska. And the main line is 470 miles of track. And their active rolling stock of the Alaska Railroads, they have about 50 to 60 diesel locomotives. And there's a steam locomotive that's actually being restored in Wasilla. And since I was there this summer, they actually got it under steam into November. And this was the first time in the 60 years that they fired it up. It's not fully restored yet, but it's probably in the next couple of years they'll be running it. Other rolling stock includes 45 passenger coaches. Many of them are Vista domes or also like kind of double decker domes, coaches, diners. And then also the cruise line company, Holland America, has a dozen dome cars. And officially there's 1,381 freight cars. I don't know if that's exactly the number at this moment, but um, there are also freight cars that come and go from Washington and Prince Rupert. Here we are. So another photo from the cruise ship in Whittier. That building in the background, it's built in the 50s, and I'm pretty sure pretty much everyone in Whittier lives in that building, something like that. It's basically a giant apartment building. Whittier is the main port for the Alaska Railroad where freight cars come in and unload. It used to be Seward, but that was destroyed in 1964. It was one of the largest earthquakes ever, and Good Friday earthquake, and 100 pieces of equipment was destroyed, and miles of track went into the ocean, and the whole yard was destroyed. Here we are passing that train. It's called the Glacial Discovery. It goes from Whittier to Anchorage. And here we go through a tunnel that up until 2000 was only train only. But they since then they've allowed cars and trains to go through it, and it's the longest dual road and rail tunnel in the Western Hemisphere. And it's the longest highway tunnel in the US. Only one way at a time going through it. This tunnel was made in the and Whittier, the railroad went to Whittier, was built to Whittier, and during World War II, it was kind of like military necessity to build a port farther up into the bay. Seward's a little more out closer to open ocean near where the Japanese ships would have been. Here's the Anchorage to Seward Coastal Classic passing by Seward Airport. This is near where we're staying at an Airbnb. Um, about 1,000 feet away was the railroad track, so I caught the northbound train coming through. And this is the same train in Consus that we'll be riding the next day. I'm not sure if they have two trains or not. I think it's just might just be one Coastal Classic. Here we are at milepost 0 and Seward. Seaward or Seward? I haven't made up my mind yet. I'm not sure how to should say it. I really like these the wheels, how they look. This photo is taken from the Vista Dome. Heading north on the Coastal Classic. We're pulled by the SD70 Mac and GP 40-2, baggage car, Gold Star class, the first class service dome cars, another coach, a cafe diner, and a coach, and then the Vista Dome that I'm in, and then behind me, two more coaches. And the left is inside the coach, and on the right's inside the cafe dining car. It's inside the dining car. There's Pam inside the Vista Dome. It's built by Bud in the 1950s. So both Pam and this coach are from Philly. Crossing a Trail Creek Bridge at milepost 33. It's 113 miles from Seward to Anchorage. And this was the only train trip where I had access to the very back of the train, so I took advantage of that. These are some of my favorite photos, actually. This one in particular, I like how the sun hits the mountain. This is a giant horseshoe curve at in Grandview, Alaska. And this in this general area, there used to be loops on the railroad, two loops, and it was replaced. But there used to be two loops, a tunnel, a snow shed, and several trestles. And here in this photo, you can see the beginning of the curve and the end of the curve. Starting to rain a little bit, see in the distance. And this creek it's the same creek that's in the background too, in the mountain on the left, and it's just really flowing with snow melt, glacial melt. There's a series of tunnels starting around milepost 53, just several miles after that horseshoe curve. Photo on the left, I like the contrast between the how green and luscious everything is from all the rain and then the snowy mountains. In the bottom right, that track, there's a track there. That's actually the track from Whittier. Meets the main line in Portage, Alaska. The Whittier branch is about I think 14 miles. Here's the Turnagain Arm, which is the second highest, has the second highest tidal range in the world. Can sometimes low tide and high tide difference can be 30 to 40 feet. And we travel on this for about 40 miles. Pretty much the whole coastline in this photo the train runs along. It's the Vista Dome. You can tell here it's not totally high tide, but I don't believe it's totally low tide either. Of stormy weather in the back. Can you spot Billy? Billy Goat? The conductor was on the back of the train with me. He actually spotted it first in the bottom left there. And there's a conductor. His name is Vern, and he's the third most senior conductor on the railroad. All the railroaders I talked to, they're really nice and relaxed, and I think it comes with living there. It's just such a beautiful place. Nearing Anchorage now, and here we are at the Anchorage train station, and on display is a Orf 040, originally a narrow gauge engine, but was moved to the Alaska Railroad in 1917. Some scenes at the Anchorage station. The station was built around World War II, and I believe was the largest building in Alaska when it was built. And on the bottom right, sort of like an airport, you can check your luggage and then pick it up, and they'll handle it from there. And on the bottom left is two coaches called the Wilderness Express, and that's kind of affiliated with cruise lines. Book it through your cruise. That's another picture of a bear and an eagle. So now, after spending the night in Anchorage, we're boarding the Denali Star, which runs from Anchorage to Fairbanks. It was pulled by two SD-70 Max, a baggage car, two first class Gold Star Dome cars, a diner, a coach, a Vista Dome, and then those two Wilderness Express luxury dome cars in the back, built by Royal Caribbean in 2002. This was the only freight train I saw on the trip. My understanding is every night there's a train that leaves Anchorage and a train that leaves Fairbanks. The So this is the one from Fairbanks coming into Anchorage in the morning. There we have a photo of the mountain from 150 miles away. Below is where engine 557 is being restored in Wasilla. And like I said before, it was fired up recently for the first time in 60 years. And then not too long after, we passed by the Museum of Alaska Transportation and see some equipment. This is the only time I saw a signal bridge this big. It's part of a junction for a branch that hasn't been completed yet, I think due to bureaucracy and but it's 32 miles long and supposed to go to a port and on the o ocean and bring in coal and minerals to ships. I think unless Anchorage has some loading, it may be the besides Whittier, the only other port. It's the Alaskan mountain range from 100 miles away. Further up the line, when you're closer to Denali, you actually can't really see it. I think the foothills are kind of blocking the view, so it's more in these farther distances where you get better view. Here we are at Talkeetna, and we're stayed there for 2 days. So that milepost 223. Fairbanks is milepost 470 from Seward. This is the Hurricane Turn train, the only flag stop train in the US, and it stops anywhere between Talkeetna at milepost 223 and up to Hurricane at milepost 284. And anywhere in between, if a hiker or local needs a ride, they just flag the train down. Here comes a cruise train. It's on its way to the Denali National Park station. And I thought this was neat, is two Alaska Railroad trains meeting each other. Not one of them is even the main Denali Star one. So some good rail fanning in Talkeetna. The Hurricane Turn engine number 31. It used to be an Amtrak F40. Now it's a cab control car. Alaska Railroad has two of these. And Pam and I, we actually rode the Hurricane Turn. We did a tour at Sturgeon where we rode the train for a distance and then took a boat ride back down to Talkeetna. That's Mary. She's the conductor and the narrator of the Hurricane Turn. And we went into a siding, and a cruise train passed by, and it had the one of a kind heritage unit celebrating 100 years of the Alaska Railroad. It's painted up a few years ago. That it reached 100 years in 2023. And we got off the turn at milepost 248 and It's called Curry. Curry also had a couple of pieces of rolling stock on display. It's a rotary snowplow number 3 built in 1930. It was steam powered until the 60s. I saw 3 or 4 rotaries on the trip. Here's the inside of it. Back in Talkeetna, I caught the southbound Denali passing through. On the left is the old Talkeetna station. It's now the current station's a few miles down and larger. But this where I'm taking the photo here is like right in the town of Talkeetna, which is just a couple blocks. Now at the newer station, getting on the train. This is the longest day of train riding I had. Went from Talkeetna to Fairbanks, and on this segment we rode in first class, so we had outdoor views and full dining service. The train's pulled in, and here's the first class Gold Star Dome cars that we rode. On the train now, passing the Hurricane Turn. The turn just sits, when it's not running, it just sits in the town of Talkeetna. Like the day before with the Hurricane Turn, we pull into this siding to let another train pass. I couldn't really find a official schedule for these cruise trains, but on this trip from when we rode from Talkeetna to Fairbanks, we passed 3 trains. We passed 2 cruise trains and then the other Denali, southbound Denali. Here we are passing Curry where we were the previous day. This is milepost 248.5 inside the dome car. To the right, that's the outdoor viewing area. Here's inside the diner. The bottom right, another cruise train is passing by. I was pretty excited because I haven't had much experience with full dining service. These photos were taken pretty much around the same time. It really shows the variety you can get in wild Alaska, different kinds of trees. And here we are at milepost 284.2, crossing the Hurricane Gulch Bridge. It's the highest bridge on the railroad at 296 feet high. Countless curves and bridges on the journey. Here we are at Broad Pass, milepost 304, 80 miles from Talkeetna. We're meeting the southbound Denali. And here, when the two trains meet, the crews switch trains and they head back to where they started. Sort of a way to keep them at home all the time. So here we see the engineers switching, saying hello to our counterparts. Here's one of the Bud-built Vista domes. And at this point, the train's just crawling because it's going to stop again for the conductors and dining staff to switch trains. There they are switching. This was a pretty long, straight stretch of track too, which was there weren't too many places like that. This is pretty funny. There's actually a lot happening here. You have this lady on the right pretending she's a moose. And we say farewell. They continue down to Anchorage as we head up to Fairbanks. Around here, I'd say is the closest we were to Mount Denali, but couldn't really see it because there's other mountains in the way. But still very beautiful. This photo on the left and right, they were taken at the same time, basically. Same curve. These two as well, they're taken on the same curve. And that's the Nanina River Valley. We follow that for dozens of miles. This river flows north and eventually goes to the Yukon River. Here we are at the Denali Park Station. This was the only station stop between Talkeetna and Fairbanks. Looks like maybe a recent landslide. Here we're going under the Parks Highway, which is the main road between Anchorage and Fairbanks. Probably the only road. And around here is also where the gorge begins, the Nanina River Gorge. It's pretty one of the most scenic parts on the trip. It lasts about 10 miles. You fall in a canyon, the river. These are some daring rail fans. They here to see the train. I really th enjoyed the fact of how the terrain changed so much throughout the trip. Really a heavy volume of water in the summertime. This is one of my favorite photos, and while I was taking it, I was like, wow, this is definitely going to be one of the best. Shortly after, we kind of plateau and reach a swampy, marshy area, and it basically stays like this all the way to Fairbanks. Some wildlife. I thought it was interesting. There's only a couple of original stations left, but two that I saw was in Seward at the bottom here, bottom left, uh, and it's also where construction began on the railroad in 1904. And then another place, it's on the Denali train I saw in Nanina, milepost 411, and this is where the railroad ended. Was completed in 1923 at the bridge, near the bridge in the top center photo. And now, just an hour or two from Fairbanks, while having supper, we started noticing the forests were burned out, and we heard reports of forest fires that summer. The further north we went during the whole trip, the warmer it got. So I was kind of surprised by that. Fairbanks was the warmest place on the trip around. It was like a 90-degree day we had. Here's scenes of the burned out forests. And it was kind of hazy the rest of the trip too. Sort of an interesting contrast. You think, oh, we're nearing the Arctic Circle and it's hot and hazy. But eventually we get to some green forest again. Still hazy in the background. Nearing Fairbanks, there's a little bit more sign of civilization. Cross some roads here and there, see houses. There's some farmland, agriculture when getting closer to the Fairbanks. There's an industry near Fairbanks. And the last few miles of the trip were in the yards in Fairbanks. And just wrote here that mostly all the equipment you see, all the railroad equipment at some point came to Alaska on a barge unless built in Alaska. And some freight cars come and go in and out of the state. Yeah, it's pretty hazy in Fairbanks. Got that golden light too from the haze covering the sun. There's a GP40 in the yard. On the right, that was the only time I saw an engine in that paint scheme. I know like in the 70s and 80s it was more prominent. I'm not sure if they only used that paint scheme to pull freight or what, but it was interesting to see. Here we are arriving at Fairbanks. 470 new railroad miles for me. And took about 16 and a half hours total from Seward up to Fairbanks. From here, the track keeps going actually for about 20 or 30 more miles. It ends at a military base. It's inside the station, pretty big station. It wasn't open, but there was a big model train layout in the station as well. The Tanana Valley Model Railroad Club. It's outside. And they sort of had like a baggage claim, like at an airport. And I like to end the show with like how the train ended the train should be with some photos of cabooses.